and welcome to another episode of ADHD Women's Wellbeing Wisdom. Little short bite-sized pieces of wisdom that I've curated from all the many episodes that have been recorded over this time, and I really hope that this short insight will help you on the week ahead. Today you'll hear from Priyanka Patel. She's a pharmacist. She's got a big social media presence under Little Miss ADHD, and she is on a mission to help more women become listened to by their GPs and health professionals to get the support that they deserve, either through medication or through therapy and coaching. Let's hear from Priyanka.
With depression, I think it's very difficult when it comes to ADHD because you've got two parts of it. So either the symptoms which you're showing have been misdiagnosed as depressive symptoms, or your undiagnosed ADHD symptoms have then led to depressive symptoms, which I think is what happened with me, because when I was on antidepressants, it was helping a bit. Like, I did feel a little bit better, but it was just the things of, not being able to get up and go to work, not feeling motivated, not being able to control my emotions. Like, I was so forgetful. I locked myself out of the house like so many times. I literally had to phone my boyfriend crying, like, please let me in the house. I'm outside, like, shivering. It was just daily things, which were just a nuisance. And it was like, there has to be someone else going on because, I don't really feel that sad anymore. I feel frustrated and upset because of all these other things going on in my life, which just nothing really seems to be helping. No matter what I was doing, I would try and set alarms to make sure I was on time. Like, I would try and make reminders on my phone to make sure I wouldn't forget things. But I just felt like my life was out of control. And I have a very boring life. So, even that I couldn't handle. So that's when I saw that TikTok, I was like, this makes sense, because they can't just keep upping my dose if the symptoms aren't really being relieved. And yeah, that's kind of like the connection between ADHD and depression in a summary.
Yeah, because what you're describing is, on one hand, you are highly academic, clearly a very clever person.
Thanks.
And, well, listen, you can't go through your pharmaceutical training and degrees and all that without having an intellect.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is then we wonder why we have such negative self-belief and we have such a lot of, self-criticism, because on the other hand, we're locking ourselves out the house, we're forgetting things. The amount of times I've left the key in the door, and we call ourselves ditzy. Other people call us ditzy. Other people are like, oh, your head's in the clouds and why can't you remember anything? And it's all those confounding beliefs that we have about ourselves, and then, potentially from family members or friends, where it may be said in a jokey way. And we kind of don't understand ourselves. We don't understand why we have two different parts, where there's so many things that we can do brilliantly, but very simple day-to-day functioning things we find, so tricky. And very often we focus on those things as opposed to the amazing achievements like degrees and jobs and all sorts of things, writing books and being an amazing artist and all the things that kind of other people might go, wow. But we're like, well, we burnt the dinner again, or I forgot to pick the kids up, or I can't remember when I need to change the bed. And these little things mount up, especially, I've talked about this all the time, is like, as women, because those little things kind of come to like who we are as women.
The societal expectation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, you talk about your dad, and your dad was obviously amazingly helpful and understanding. From coming from an Asian community, family, was ADHD, was mental health issues even discussed? How did that sort of manifest for you growing up, especially if you did suffer? When did your mental health issues start coming about, and how was it dealt with within your family?
So I think growing up, I always had a lot of low self-esteem issues. I wasn't a very confident child. I didn't have a lot of friends. The only friend I actually had in high school was a friend that was actually very toxic. She would always put me down. She wasn't a very nice person, and she was my only friend. I didn't really have a choice, I felt at the time. So, my self-esteem was just completely battered from the ages of 12 to 17. And even in primary school, I really have trouble making friends. And I don't remember enjoying school at all. I'm not going to lie. I really did hate it. And I don't think it was ever really picked up by my parents, because they probably just thought, oh, she's growing up. She's having a bit of a bicker with the girls in her class. Like, it wasn't really noticed. But I guess like when I was diagnosed with depression, I didn't really speak about it with my family because it's not really stuff that we talk about. It's just not really within our house. Like it's a bit strange. I mean, I'm just trying to think if there's anyone in my family I'd speak to this about, but there isn't. And then it was a year after I was diagnosed when I decided, okay, I need medication. Like this is just getting too much. And I tried to explain it to my mum, but she wasn't happy with me starting medication. And I was just trying to explain to her, like, I just didn't wake up one day and say, oh, I'm sad, I need medicine. It was a long decision, but I think she just didn't understand, because I think a lot of traditional, I wouldn't say she's traditional, but she's from an older generation. They've been through a lot to come here. She went through a lot when she was younger, and when she had me and my siblings, like, living with the in-laws, like coming to a completely different country, like building your life, like completely not dismissing that. But then I just don't think they understand that our generation have their own problems, even though to them, we have everything. That's what they think. So I think she just didn't understand, because in her head she was like, I've given you this, I've given you that, you have a stable relationship, you've got a good career, like why are you sad? It just doesn't make sense. And she kept trying to talk me out of going on medication, but I decided to just do what I thought was best for me. And then my brother and sister did know. It wasn't really anything we spoke about. I mean, I'd have breakdowns at home when I'd visit London, and my sister would just get some of my friends on the phone, put the FaceTime on and be like, she's crying, I don't know what to do. Because my sister's not very, she's lovely, but she's not very in tune with her emotions as much as I am. And then when the subject of ADHD came up, like, I said to my parents, I was like, did you not think I had it as a child? And my mum and dad, like my dad was working all the time, so I don't even think he noticed, to be honest. But my mum, she said she suspected it, but she didn't want to have a child with ADHD. She didn't want me to be put on medication. She was worried if I got diagnosed that they would put me on medicine. And this is where a huge problem lies as well, is with the stigma of medicating children, because people think that it's such a bad thing. And then you've also got the aspect of, I was their firstborn child. They think children, what if this is what all children are like? That's what they also thought. And then, just the stigma of it with Indian culture about having a child with ADHD, I don't think it's something that they wanted to accept, because at that time, my grandparents possibly would have blamed it on their parenting, or, or you're giving her too much sugar, you're not disciplining her. So, there was probably a lot of reason as to why they didn't get me tested. I feel a bit betrayed, because if I had been diagnosed, I might not have had such a difficult childhood and, growing up in school and all of that. But then when the subject came up again, like my dad, so he didn't really understand, but he understood that I needed this. He was really open to learning, like bless him. I still remember, like, he would come in like every day, a couple of times a day, into the living room, because I'd just be sat on the sofa all day because I just couldn't do anything. And he'd ask me questions, and he just wanted to know about it and learn about it, because he didn't realize that this was something that could be a possibility. So he was very open to understanding this. And you know what? It's very unusual, but I don't think I've received any stigma from my dad. Like, he was probably the most supportive one out of my whole family, which I think a lot of people within Indian culture will find very strange. It's not really something you see with a traditional Indian father, to be so understanding when it comes to mental health. Like my mum, she still doesn't like that I'm on medication, because she also works in pharmacy as well. So she knows that the medication for ADHD is a controlled drug. So she's like, oh, you shouldn't be on that. It's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you can do it without medication. I'm just like, Mom, come on, not this again. And then when I try to explain to her, like, oh, this is, how the symptoms affect me when I'm at work, she's like, oh, but all my pharmacists do this as well. And I think that's like a trigger for everyone with ADHD when people say, oh, yeah, but I do that. And I was just like, my brain was just like exploding. So I was just like, oh my God, please just try and understand. So I think it's just kind of chipping away, because it's still very new. It's still very recent. I don't know if my mum believes I have it still, actually. Yeah, my siblings, I don't really speak to them about it. They know I have it, and they take the piss out of me, because that's what siblings do. So sorry, I'm rambling.
No, absolutely. Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it, to hear? I mean, your dad sounds very open and probably, quite intuitive, and it's very hard. I hear this a lot from people, that there's just certain family members that really do trigger us, because they just don't want to know. Their ignorance is there, and they're not willing to open their eyes past the medication. They're not willing to open their eyes past the old stigmas of ADHD and what it looks like. And I have someone in my family that's like that, and she just poo-poos it all. And it's damaging for me, and it's damaging for my kids, because I don't want them to think that maybe they don't, maybe they don't need help, maybe, you know, they're imagining it. And it's a very tricky one. So I just sometimes think there's certain people that we open up to, and there's certain people that we sort of just create our little kind of energetic box around, and and hope that, you know, one day they will understand. From a medication perspective, and again, you know, I've never had a pharmacist on the podcast before. And there are people out there who are nervous about taking medication, and they do, even though they've been diagnosed and maybe their kids are on medication, they worry about themselves going on a medication. Maybe they've tried one type, it's not worked, and they don't want to try another type. Is there anything that you can, you know, from your background, talk about with regards to the medication? Because we read so much about it when we hear how helpful it can be, but there is a part of us, there are many of us who have struggled with the medication and it hasn't agreed with them, and they have to commit to life with managing lots of the holistic and the lifestyle without medication. What are your thoughts, I guess, trying different types? And I'd love to hear your journey and how you feel on your medication.
Yeah, so the way that most of the ADHD medication works, so the first line is stimulants, which I think a lot of people are very skeptical about. It's just really important to remember that if they were that dangerous, they wouldn't be allowed to be prescribed, end of, you know. So they are licensed in this country. And people think that when you take them, you're going to have this sort of, you know, magic effect, and you're just going to be like, your whole pupils are dilated. You're just going to be like, just in the zone, completely working. But if you have ADHD, it's going to be such a subtle effect. Yeah, so you'll get titrated very slowly, depending on a lot of factors about yourself. If you have any cardiovascular issues, if you have any other previous mental health diagnosis, you know, they take everything into consideration and decide what is going to be the best thing for you. So most of the time, they will start with a stimulant and, you know, titrate it out very slowly to make sure that you're tolerating the side effects. Usually some people find with stimulants, they have increased anxiety symptoms, which is normal. I experienced that as well, particularly when I went from the jump of 36 milligrams to 54. I was freaking out because I thought, oh my God, like this is too much. Like I'm going to die. Like, but it went after a few days. It's just because of the dose increase. So a lot of the times when you start medication and you feel a certain way, you feel really jittery and anxious and on edge. And sometimes it can lead people to be like, no, I don't want to take this anymore. But it usually goes after a couple of days. And you know, I think up to 80% of patients actually are successful with ADHD medication. My nurse prescriber told me ADHD, once it's diagnosed, is one of the most easiest things to treat. So, you know, people have to go in with an open mind and realize that this medication is really, really going to help them. I would also say, though, if you have a diagnosis of anxiety before the diagnosis of ADHD, just take a bit of caution with the stimulants, because sometimes they can make your anxiety symptoms worse. So it's really important that if you are started on a stimulant, to make sure you're letting your prescriber know if your symptoms are getting even worse and completely unbearable, because then you have non-stimulants, which can actually work even better, particularly if you have more of the inattentive symptoms as well. But medication, it will help a lot with, you know, the focus, concentration, just the motivation of being able to get up and go do things. For me, like, that was the most substantial thing. Like, my boyfriend came home and I was cooking dinner and he was just like, what has happened to you? Who is this woman? You know, I'd folded the laundry, I'd taken it upstairs, and he was just like, oh my God, I don't know what's happened to you. So, but yes, it's not a magic pill. That's something else I want to reiterate. It's not a magic pill. It won't solve everything. Like, I still am struggling with, you know, certain things, as in my hypersensitivities. I get really anxious if I'm in an environment where it's really loud or there's just too many people, and I'm struggling as well with trying to keep my irritability in check, because a lot of things irritate me. And, you know, I'm still very forgetful, I'm not going to lie. I do forget to do things, but it's just about trying to then manage those symptoms, because then you know what actually is something that can be managed with drugs, and then what the things that can't be managed with drugs.
for you, there's some social reform that you want to be doing. You want to be helping more people with ADHD. Tell us a little bit about your plans because I love this. It's big and I love it.
Thank you. So I don't know if I'm being completely unrealistic about this, but I have a huge vision about changing the way that ADHD is sort of dealt with. So my goal at the moment is to really try and improve access for women, because when I was sharing TikToks about what I was going through, I had a lot of women reach out to me. It was really bittersweet because I was so overwhelmed by how lovely and supportive everyone was being. But then at the same time, I was like, why are there so many women who have been through what I have? It just wasn't right. And then, you know, I made a video then about like, what I wanted to do to kind of improve with the NHS on how ADHD is dealt with. And I had a lot of women who were really supporting and wanting this to move forward. So I am trying to get a project moving within my NHS trust. It is a bit challenging because I work in secondary care. The issues that I want to solve are more within primary care, within actually getting that initial referral. So I do think the way moving forward is to really have GPs truly understand what ADHD symptoms look like in women, because there are so many things which affect it, like puberty, menopause, or hormones, everything to do with that. Then the fact that we can be misdiagnosed with other disorders more than men, and that more women tend to show inattentive symptoms compared to hyperactive. And if we have hyperactive symptoms, they're not seen as hyperactive because we might have like really restless mind, which is a symptom of hyperactivity, but we mask it because we were talking about this earlier about societal expectations, that we have this pressure as women to appear a certain way. And then I'll bring in culture again, because when you're in an Indian culture, you have the expectation to be like, a good housewife, a good mother, to keep everything running. And that's already hard. But when you don't have those executive functioning skills, that's even harder. And, I've been called lazy. I have been called all sorts of things because I just can't do it. And, my family call me Hurricane Hilda when I go back home because everything is just a mess. And no matter what I do, I just cannot get everything in order. So, there's all these things which are just making it so difficult for women just to get that first step, to get the referral. So that's what I'm really trying to work on. And then we also need to look at, the follow-up with ADHD clinics, as in, why do they just give us medication and then put us with our GPs and that's it? You have to do it holistically. Give us coaching, help us with lifestyle improvements, help us with diet hacks. There's so many things which impact our ADHD symptoms. You can't just give us a pill and then say, right, this is it, just go, you'll be fine. It's not right. And I just don't feel like people with ADHD just get the recognition even after getting the diagnosis on, how severe it is. So this is something that I'm really trying to push, because I don't think people understand how undiagnosed ADHD can really impact your life. And I feel that's why there's not enough funding for these services, because I think because of the stereotype, you think, okay, if someone's not diagnosed or treated, they'll just be a bit hyper. They might not be able to focus a bit, but it'll be fine. No. Oh my God. There's increased risks of suicide, increased risk of car accidents, increased risk of comorbid mental health conditions, financial debt, broken relationships, you lose your house, your kids. There's so many things which happen, which the NHS funding body or whoever it is that decides where the money goes, I just don't think they understand. And this is where we really have to show them and say, look, this is the reality of what's happening. Just because you can't physically see it, like a blood clot, or or an infection, doesn't mean that it's not important. So yeah, there's a lot to be done, and I really do hope that I can spend the rest of my life and career trying to work on this, because I think I've really found my passion with what I want to do. And I'm going to try everything, even if it means I'm ramming down GP doors, being like, look, I've got a leaflet about ADHD in women, you have to read it, I'm not going to leave until you read it. So that I'm going to figure out a way around this. I feel like if you are determined enough and you have enough motivation to do something, you will do it. And I think as well, this is where I feel like my ADHD has helped me a lot, because when you hyper focus on something and you absolutely love it, you put all your time and energy into it. And like every day I'm working hours on, gathering evidence, making my Instagram posts, making TikToks, just to raise awareness and to work on it in a research perspective as well. So, I really do hope I can make change, even if it's just one woman that I can help. When I am old and in my 90s, or I hope I live till at least 100 or whatever, but, I will die happy knowing that it's just even one woman that I helped.
Oh. So I hope you enjoyed listening to this shorter episode of the ADHD Women's Wellbeing podcast. I've called it the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Wisdom because I believe there's so much wisdom in the guests that I have on and their insights. So sometimes we just need that little bit of a reminder, and I hope that has helped you today, and look forward to seeing you back on the brand new episode on Thursday. Have a good rest of your week.